Hey guys, Wood Boyles with Blue Collar Talent Scouts. Listen, just wanted to touch base with you again about another hot topic that's coming around. It's always around. Listen, 20 years plus in HR, both in blue collar and in high tech. This issue could come up in any of those contexts, but it's especially prevalent on the blue collar side. Blue collar meaning plumbing, AC, even electrical to some degree. You know, every company has those issues that come up outside of bankers' hours, if you will, and those issues need to be addressed quickly. Sometimes it's for the benefit of the homeowner because the homeowner's got health issues, could be a catastrophic issue if you've got some type of pipe breakage or water heater breakage, those types of things. Sometimes it's for the protection of the company from liability because, hey, look, you were just out there. This is a recall. There's an issue, and you need to make sure you do right by the client. So on call is a fact of life. It really is. But it's also one of the biggest questions we get asked about when we're talking with clients about work opportunities with a new employer. What do they do on call? What is their on call policy? How often will I be on call? What do they do to take care of you while you're on call? All of those are different questions that come up pretty regular. And we've seen a bunch of different methods. I've seen them in the companies I've worked with as well about how companies will incentivize workers or technicians to do that on-call work. They'll do a bonus. They'll do an upcharge, to the client for after-hours charges. They'll do an additional pay. They'll increase the pay rate or mark it up on the hourly rate for the technician. Any of those types of things. Recently saw this as a meme online, and we'll put it up here for you, but it's not too far from true in some cases. It's that expectation that everyone's going to just stop their life and be ready for those on call. So when you're not working, you must be. This is the thing. I'll read it to you. Attention, all staff. When you're not working, you must be reachable via your cell phone. If you can't be reached to accept the voluntary mandatory shift coverage of a coworker who's called in, you'll be written up. 2 or more write-ups, and you will be eligible for termination. I love that. We used to say in HR, invited to join our outplacement program. Remember to ask yourself, how can I best serve the company when you're thinking about not answering your phone while on your day off or vacation? Go team. Unless you're doing profit sharing, unless you're doing something where there's some employee ownership in that, employees don't have the same level of commitment to a company as you do. You'll get good employees and they'll do this, but they can get tired too. And sometimes that's the reason they'll come to companies like us. They'll talk to us about, going and looking for something else. So first, let's just briefly mention this, that there's some states that just that'll get you in trouble. You don't do the on-call pay correctly. You don't pay for all hours worked. Years ago in California, for example, it's always California. They settled this issue by basically saying if you spend any hours or part of an hour at work on a PTO day, that's no longer a PTO day. And so at that point, they would require that you pay for those vacation days because it's an accrued benefit at some point in the future. So, and I know California, Massachusetts, they're a little bit more difficult than a lot of states, but it can happen where you're at. DOL, Department of Labor Wage and Hour, also says you got to pay people for all hours they've worked. So that means you've got to keep records, and you've got to keep good defensible records when it comes to that. So let's talk about that. You also have day of rest rules, and I won't mention much about those, but that requires 1 day out of 7 on average in any given month that the employee be given that time off without any responsibilities. So those day of rest rules can come into play, especially this time of year where you're working guys 6 and 7 days a week, and sometimes they'll go 2-3 weeks without a day off. That becomes a real hindrance to you because, again, so long as a guy's not complaining, so long as a guy's a team player and is going to do what's right by the company, in your mind, in my mind, whatever, that's okay. But as soon as they get sideways, they always know who to talk to. They always know what to do. And I will tell you, as a labor law attorney, when I would have someone come to me, the first thing I would say is, all right, let's talk about your hours. How were you paid? Were you paid hourly? Did they document all hours? Did you get your time off? Did you get your lunch breaks? Did you get your rest periods? And if that wasn't the case, especially where I practiced in California, that was easy pickings. That was like fruit, low-hanging fruit that you could grab off the tree. So let's talk about the real issue. When is a person to be paid for running on call? And of course, there's lawyers and government officials involved in this. The Department of Labor says the key question is this. Is the tech engaged to wait, or are they waiting to be engaged? Again, it's a word game, right? But here's the thing. If it's engaged to wait, if they're engaged to wait, that means they have to be paid for the entire time. They're on call from, say, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. Hey, they're on the clock. And part of that is defined by what's expected. If they're expected to respond to customer calls within an hour, if they're expected to have availability to immediately take those calls and they aren't free to do anything else or focus on anything else, they are engaged to wait, and they are due pay, according to the Department of Labor, according to most state labor boards, state wage and hour boards as well. If the tech is waiting to be engaged, that means they've got a little bit more flexibility. And the tech's only paid for when they're actively responding to a call. That means, for example, you know what? Your tech, your on-call tech, there's not a call. He takes his family to dinner. He gets a page or he gets a text or he gets a call and says, hey, we got to go see Miss Jones, take care of Miss Jones. He's got to have a little bit more time to respond to it, typically 90 minutes to 2 hours. And at that point, he finishes his dinner with his family. He goes home. As soon as he starts to put on his uniform, that's when he goes on the clock. And he's on the clock the entire time from when he leaves his driveway or from when he puts that uniform on to when he hits that driveway at the back end of it. As always, this isn't legal advice, but it is something that you need to think about because you have an employee right now who's probably doing those on-call shifts and they get disgruntled for some reason or another. If you aren't doing it right, that becomes an area where you can easily be challenged, where you can easily kind of be picked on. And they got a big stick with the state. They got a big stick with the Department of Labor and wage and hour. So if you have issues, if you have concerns or questions about the way you're doing that, you need to consult with a lawyer in your area. Make sure that you're taking care of this the right way because that will save you a lot of money in the long run. We've seen companies get fined into the hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't pay on time and they didn't pay the right way. There's also, and this is just a heads up, that there's an implication of this. If you've got a dispatcher who's sitting at home and has to answer every call, how are you tracking their time? How are you paying them? That's another area. Hey, if you want to talk about these things, again, 20 years in the trades, 3 years in high-tech manufacturing, I've seen it from both ends where something happens, all of a sudden their performance goes south, they get disciplined, and the next thing you know, you've got the state labor board knocking on your door, sending you letters, telling you owe them money. Give me a shout, 713-545-2362. Love to talk to you about this. These are the types of things they're minutia. They may not seem that important, but in the long run, they can save you a lot of money or they can cost you a lot of money. Once again, Wood Boyle's Blue Collar Talent Scouts, 713-545-2362.